For a certain demographic of player, there is nothing more exciting than the creation of your own build. While PoE might not have the in-depth character customization of some games, it offers something most games can't, the ability to create a truly unique one-of-a-kind build. For those of us who have accepted our special snowflake urges, there is nothing as exciting as testing your unique creation against some of the hardest content the game has to offer. One of the things a new player may struggle with is scaling their damage, finding that their PoB numbers look paltry in comparison to even the average streamer build. So let's get into how to scale your damage. This video is aimed at newer players, so more niche interactions and exceptions to certain rules will be avoided entirely in the interest of simplicity and fostering an understanding of the fundamentals of how the game works. However, intermediate players can use this as a sort of checklist when putting together their own builds. The first step in the damage equation is flat damage. For attack builds, that comes from affixes and weapons, such as seen here, and for spells, that comes from base gems and items and support gems that modify them, granting them extra levels. Both attacks and spells can benefit from support gems that give flat damage, such as added cold damage support and added lightning damage support. Flat damage will then be multiplied by increased damage, which is found on the passive tree, cluster jewels, items, and, in small but meaningful amounts, on the quality stat on support gems. Next, more multipliers will be applied, which can be commonly found on support gems and auras. More multipliers are unique because they're multiplicative with themselves, unlike increased damage, which is additive. For instance, 60% more damage will grant you 60% more damage, but 20% more multipliers will actually grant you closer to 73% more damage. You can think of more damage, increased damage, and flat damage as your holy trinity, the three things you always want to be keeping in mind when balancing your build. Another important aspect of your damage is the speed at which you apply it. For spell builds, this is cast speed. Your base cast speed from spells cannot be modified, but it will then be multiplied by increases and even cast speed more multipliers, the same as your regular damage. Increases can be found on the passive tree and items, while more multipliers and increases can be found on support gems. For attack builds, your application speed will be attack speed. Unlike with spells, this can be modified by local attack speed mods, such as seen here. We have attacks per second 1.6, and with one local mod, changes the attacks per second to 2.05, and this then is your new base attack speed. Increases can be found on the passive tree and items, as well as support gems. The next thing we want to be thinking about is how we penetrate and/or reduce monster resistances. The first common way will be through the use of support gems, and secondly, through the use of curses. The last damage scaling vector we will look at is increases to damage taken by monsters. Commonly, this will be shock, which can be applied through critical strikes with lightning damage, or regular lightning damage with a % chance to shock. For chaos damage, we have wither, and for physical damage, we have the pride aura. The next question you should ask yourself is if you're going crit or non-crit. Non-crit has some unique benefits, such as the Precise Technique keystone and the Elemental Overload keystone. Precise Technique is focused on attacks, and Elemental Overload, while it works with attacks, because of its placement on the tree, is often used with spells. Crit will generally scale better as you get more levels, gear, and currency, but early game, and in some niche situations, Elemental Overload and Precise Technique are very powerful. Crit, like everything else we've discussed, works by multiplying your base crit by your increased crit. Some common ways of increasing your base crit are the increased critical strike support gem, Assassin's Mark, glove corruptions, and local modifiers on your weapon. Note, this only applies to attack builds, not spell builds. Some common ways of increasing your crit are power charges, which provide 50% increased crit each, the passive tree, as well as item modifiers. Lastly, let's note that different skills in Path of Exile have unique mechanics that provide them with additional scaling vectors that other skills may not have, such as projectile speed for spark, projectile count for tornado shot, area of effect for reap, which grants it overlaps, or returning projectiles for molten strikes, which allows projectiles to come back and shotgun.